Hello and welcome to another MILSURP HQ podcast. Oh, wait, I wanted to do my Forgotten Weapons intro here. Hi, guys. Thanks for tuning into another... I can't do it. I'm sorry. I tried.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of MILSURP HQ podcast.
Oh, that's perfect. We're saving that.
See how I did? I did pretty good there. So today we're honored to welcome one of the world's foremost authorities on firearms, a man whose experience is unparalleled and who has not just seen it all, he's practically shot it all too. He's a walking encyclopedia of weaponry. He's the driving force behind ForgottenWeapons.com and the new History of Weapons and War app and the site over at weaponsandwar.tv. Please welcome historian, author, and fellow crazy collector, Ian McCollum.
Wow, I think that's the most intimidating intro I've ever had. I don't know that I can live up to much of that, but I'll try.
I think you'll do fine. So I appreciate you giving us the time to come on and talk to us. I know how busy you are, and especially with the app and all the stuff you always have going on. So thank you so much.
But no, this will be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
You don't strike me as someone who just wakes up and has nothing to do that day.
Not so much, no. There's always something, like I said. I tend to spend about a third of my days on the road traveling, mostly filming. So when I'm here at home, it's a lot of video editing, a lot of research, prep, book writing, book editing, you name it.
Never ends.
Yep, pretty much. But that's the fun part. It never ends.
Right.
All right. Well, we can just go ahead and hop right into it. We always ask a couple of questions whenever we have a new guest on. We like to discuss what kind of collector are you? So we know that you obviously like French stuff, but do you consider yourself a pattern collector? Do you only collect French stuff, or are you just kind of all over the map?
Oh, I was all over the map for a long time. I'd buy whatever kind of looked interesting at the time, and eventually I realized I was just kind of accumulating this weird melange of stuff, a lot of it odd, and I really ought to specialize. And so I chose to specialize many years ago in French small arms, and I guess I think you would call me a pattern collector, in that what I'm primarily looking for is like one of each variation of something. I tend to prefer moderately used. Like I like honest, decent wear on a gun. Frankly, totally pristine, like the day they came out of the factory guns, make me a little bit nervous. I don't need to necessarily have that. I'll stick with something that went through some use and shows it, but is still in good operable condition.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question actually, and part of that is, do you go for like all matching examples, or are you fine with like a replacement part here and there?
I mean, I'd always prefer matching, but if my choices are non-matching or don't have the gun at all, I will go for non-matching. Actually, one of the conundrums just like this that I had to make a decision on one time was I have a pre-war MOS 39 or MOS 36 CR39, so the paratrooper underfolding MOS 36. And I got it in trade from a French collector who wanted an Arasaka. And, Arasakas are pretty easy to come by over here, so I found what he wanted. And he had two of these things. One of them was in better condition, and the other one was matching.
Oh.
And I choose. You take the matching bolt, that was the issue in this case, or the better condition.
What did you do?
I took the matching gun.
If you're not going to shoot it that much, then take the matching.
Yeah.
So you took this, so that answers it. So you're more about the matching than the condition.
Yes. Now in this case, like it wasn't that much worse condition. There was some discoloration. There'd been some old bit of corrosion on the gun that was repaired up, but you could still tell a bit. If it's the difference between an immaculate gun that's mismatched and a total junker, then I'll probably go for the condition.
Now, do you mess with anything that has like any sanding or rebluing or anything like that, or draw the line there?
If it's the only option I have, I'll take it. But it's something I'd always look to improve upon. So I have a couple Arasakas that are sanded, and it's like, I'd much prefer to have one that's not. But until I can find a good example of that specific series and pattern, then I'll keep this example as the best I have. With the French stuff, the stock macarons, the round stamp with the date of acceptance. Right. That's a really good example of this sort of thing, where it's really pretty hard to find, especially particularly old French rifles that have good, intact, legible stock markings. And I'll always take that if I can get it. But there are a lot of different examples, different variations I have, where the stock's been sanded or the marking's just been worn to the point of being illegible. And I'll happily have that if that's the best that I can find.
And are you good at flipping them? Like when you upgrade, you sell the one you have? You're good at doing that? Because I end up with two of everything I upgrade.
I'm not really very good at that, actually. I'm going to say that I will, and then they sometimes just kind of stick around.
Right, you find some other reason to hold on to it.
Yeah, well, it's not quite the same. It's also got, it's a different factory. So I ought to keep both of them, really. Yeah, that happens.
and do you need to have the slings and the bayonets for all of them as well?
No.
Ooh.
Well, so I have almost all the bayonet patterns for French. And I have a smattering of bayonets of other periods and countries. I like to have a set of the bayonets, but I don't need a bayonet for every rifle.
Interesting.
Slings, I mean, with French, it's kind of a non-issue because they basically had one sling and they put out on everything for about 100 years. So, yeah, I've got tons of duplicates of slings because whenever third quarter of the time, if you pick up a French rifle, it has a sling on it already. So I got a whole mess of slings. Frankly, slings annoy me a bit. They get in the way when you're trying to display rifles, when you're trying to put them on racks or on pegs. Just yeah.
And they're never that easy to take off too when you're up there hanging them on a wall.
No, they're a pain in the butt to take off, and you inevitably are going to damage them when you take them off.
Yep.
And so honestly, I don't know if I'm quite at the point where if I was presented two equal rifles, one with a sling and one without, I would deliberately take the one without the sling, but it's cool.
Yeah, I guess it depends how rare the sling is.
Yeah, there are exceptions. Arasakas.
The rubberized Arasaka slings.
Yeah, that are impossible to remove. But I've got one with a braided rope sling. I've got one of the cool quick detached Type 99 slings. Those are neat. It's not something I spend a lot of time, really hardcore trying to collect all of, but I enjoy it and appreciate it when I can get it.
And what percentage would you say of your collection is French?
About 50%.
Okay.
Wow. I was asking some people, what do you think? And I heard as high as 95%. They heard you say 95%. And some people said as low as 10%, but right there.
Right in the middle, actually. There's one thing that some collectors will do, and this honestly, this came as a surprise to me. The first person someone told me about it, because it just is kind of alien to me. Like, they'll build a collection of something, and then once they've got basically everything that they think is feasible, they'll sell the entire thing and use the money to start some other collection theme.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's like a sickness.
Yeah, I don't do that. Like, if I finish one, I'm gonna just start finding something else that's cool. So, in fact, I mentioned Arasakas. I have a decent collection of Arasakas, largely started by guns that I got from my father, who had collected Arasakas. But I would never sell off my French collection to get more Arasakas or vice versa.
Your collection is just getting larger and larger.
Yes, I think, and I'm probably not alone in that.
Yeah.
No, I'm there as well, and you can ask my wife. She knows I'm there.
Kind of how it goes. I buy 5, sell 1.
claim you sold one. One of the issues I have also is the fact that I do run a YouTube channel, and if I didn't, I have a fair number of guns I would probably get rid of. Like a really good example is I have an Argentine Mauser cavalry Mauser short rifle,
All
and
right.
I I don't collect Argentine guns. I'm not particularly interested in having a huge collection of Mausers. There's nothing particularly unusual about this one. It's in nice shape, but there's nothing special about it. I got it. I got it like 8 years ago in a batch from Rock Island. It was just nice, so I kept it. And now I'm loath to sell it because, well, what if I'm doing a video at some point where, oh, I want to compare this to a rifle in 7.65 Argentine, or I want to show the mid-length pattern of Mauser, or any number of possible situations that I can't immediately think of where if I have the gun, well, I can just go grab it off the wall. But if I don't have it, then if I really need it, I'll have to go find one and buy it. And, I already have it. So I ought to just keep it just in case something comes up where I need that as an example.
You're like a master of an excuse for yourself to keep it. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, a lot of
I'm
negotiation
hoping,
there.
yeah, and I tell myself it's because of the video channel. If I wasn't making videos, I wouldn't have that need, and I'd get rid of a number of things like that Argentine Mauser. And I think it's true, but I'll never
I
know for sure until I decide to stop Forgotten Weapons and then see if I actually sell some of that stuff.
I think you should just hold on to it because I'm the Mauser fanboy, and I want you to do more Mauser work. So I'm looking forward to it.
A little bias there.
Yeah.
The MILSURP HQ guys say I can't sell it, so that's the end of that.
Yes.
Yeah, I was
There you
totally
go.
going to.
All right. I think we had another couple questions about your collection. So for the
Prying.
rest of the non-French things, what would you say your percentage is of like MILSURP stuff versus more modern rifles?
Oh, 90% MILSURP,
Okay,
maybe a little bit more.
it's a good
It's all
place.
MILSURP, yeah. Honestly, most of the modern guns I have are because of video stuff. Interesting mechanical things or just neat concepts that come out that I'm able to work with a company and get one on loan or get a good deal on one or occasionally get one for free and use in video. And I like them, but like I'm not going out of my way to buy a lot of modern guns.
Good. That's good to hear. Because I was asking people and they were like, oh, he's got at least 60-70% modern. And he only shows you the MILSURP on the side. I'm like, all right.
No, there are times when I'm trying to think about like, oh, I want to do a cool high speed, low drag 2-gun match. What should I take? Like, I don't actually have all that much because 90% of my collection are bolt actions.
Hey, I enjoy those videos a lot more than another guy with an AR.
That is true. Yes.
All right. One last one on the collection here. You said 7 years ago now that your oldest was an 1868 the Chassepot, and your newest was a 2016 Ruger Precision. Have you updated your oldest and newest since?
You have been online stalking me.
I have been watching. We've been, the major concern was asking you questions that you've been asked a billion times already. So we tried to go over it and not do that. So
Yeah, it took
I
some
appreciate
research.
it. But yes, I have expanded in both directions. So
ooh,
newest now, like
I wonder if he went to Flintlock.
not quite. So newest, I have a number of guns that are made like this year because they're things that I've gotten from companies. So off the top of my head, the Springfield Echelon, the new Alien, those are both
Ooh,
literally current immediate production. And then I actually picked up an 1848 dated French percussion rifle.
wow.
Yeah, not something I'm really trying to expand my collection into quite yet, but it was a trade deal. I was looking to get rid of, honestly, I can't even remember what it was. But I had a guy offer me that in trade, and it was in really nice condition and good legible markings. And yeah, so now I've got one.
Once you're getting to that, that's a whole other world of MILSURP that you probably are now realizing is like just as exciting and big as the machine gun world, right? Like the whole black powder
So
realm.
it's as big, but to me, it's not quite as exciting. There is some cool stuff in there. Like I think there's a lot of technological iteration and development in flint and percussion guns that people don't really think about. And lucky me, a lot of that stuff the French were on the cutting edge of. So they've got some neat things, but they're not that exciting to most people. They're interesting to me, but not, they don't really jump out and grab me. And I don't know if you've looked at like what are all the patterns that were made of French flint and percussion guns? And the answer is a freaking gajillion of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I would wait, I don't know,
Well,
50
when they would say just like mini ball for all those guns because they couldn't say the makers.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. When in reality, about every 20 years, there was some new pattern of gun, which then got made in like 5 different variations because you had the infantry one and the dragoon one and the cavalry one and the artillery one. And then you've got the conversions of the previous pattern up to the next pattern. And then in 20 years, you repeat the whole thing. And so, oof, man, someday maybe I'll try to get into that. But that's a daunting sort of collection to try to get into if you actually want to have everything.
Well, speaking of getting into, you said before your dad was into Japanese firearms, and for those that don't know, he wrote a book. It was my first Japanese rifle book.
Oh,
Um,
excellent.
Japanese
Take that,
rifles
honey.
of World War II, I think, right?
Yes.
Um, but so when did you start getting into like Milsurp arms in general, and then why did you not get into Japanese? Because like my kids don't care about my hobby. So like when did you start caring, and why did you not get into the Japanese and then go a
So
different way?
I got into guns in general when I was in high school, and it was kind of an even mix of modern guns and historical guns. So, like my first pistol was a Colt 1903. My first rifle was just a very practical 22. Like early on, I had a Daewoo K2 at one point, but then I also had a number of MILSURP sorts of things. I didn't get into Japanese because while the whole concept was cool, while I really appreciate seeing the change, degradation in manufacture of Arasakas, I guess my dad had all of them, so it wasn't really the sort of thing I wanted to go out and get myself. Like they're all right there. I don't need to duplicate that.
Oh, that makes sense.
I want to go find my own
Yeah.
cool. Um, and in fact, that lasted a long time. I never really looked to, after I got out of school and had my own place and started collecting more seriously, I wasn't really looking to duplicate my father's collection, which is good because he eventually just kind of lost interest and moved on to other things and decided to sell off his collection. And long story short, I ended up with about half of it. And in the meantime, what
Wow.
I'd been doing with Japanese guns is looking for the weird stuff. Like I wanted to see some of the really early guns. In particular, with the Arasakas, I like finding Chinese copies. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And what about the alternate calibers like the 7.62,
yep,
39?
I've got a couple of 7.62 by 39s. I've got an 8mm Mauser example,
Yeah.
and then some 6.5 Arasaka. So when
And
I did end up getting a bunch of my dad's guns, it kind of meshed perfectly with what I already had because he had mostly the standard sort of guns, the progression of Type 38s, Type 44s, Type 99s, and I had kind of the weird stuff on the extremities.
and was he into something else besides Japanese firearms, or that was his main focus?
So this was largely before I was really aware of his gun collecting, but this relates back to you were asking what sort of collector is a person. My dad actually originally was into French and Japanese, and his interest in French guns had literally no impact on me because he wasn't doing that anymore by the time I was aware of it. What he actually did is he had a dealer's license. He had no one FFL. He was one of the infamous kitchen table gun dealers, and he would buy French guns to flip and make profit on, and he would buy Japanese for his own collection.
Wow.
So it was a way to be in the business, but also building your own collection. Like, don't get addicted to your own product sort of thing.
Right, to get to handle all the French guns.
Yeah. So what he recognized is, especially if you want to be, if you want to be a collector, but even more so if you want to be a successful dealer, you need to have an area of specialized knowledge, or else, you're kind of playing on the same field as everybody else. You want to have some advantage, something where you really understand the details of the guns you're looking at.
So, what point did he write the book in his career? In that, was it towards the end or was it early on?
Relatively late, not at the very end. I remember him taking pictures for the book in our garage, so I was probably 12 years old, something like that. I actually have a copy of it. He printed it in 96, so I was 13 years old when he printed that.
Wow.
So yeah, I didn't really know about his guns so much at that point, but I remember him taking pictures by going out in the garage, putting a white sheet on the floor, putting the rifle on it, and then climbing up on a ladder to get high enough up above the gun. And of course, this was all a film camera.
I'm taking note because my son just turned 13, and this is the stuff he's gonna remember. My dad lined up all his guns, and I did the same. I was on a ladder taking photos. Oh
I
no!
remember when I was working on my book, I was talking to him about book stuff, and it hadn't really occurred to me that he did this all with a film camera. So he'd take all the
Oh,
pictures, and then you have to wait till you get them back developed to find out if, like,
right.
did you get what you were hoping to get? Do they look good? Not our digital cameras today, where you can take 1,000 pictures and immediately see what's good and what's not.
Right. That's impressive.
Yeah, and that was everybody. It's not like he was out doing some special thing there.
Right, but to know how much work goes in back then to go into getting a book out is and continuing to do it. Like now, there's so many digital, like you said, so many digital photos. You could probably make a book on your iPhone.
Oh yeah.
So
Don't tell James Rupley I said that, because he will disagree vehemently. But you could make a mediocre looking book with an iPhone. Absolutely.
you could still a book. So why didn't you get into Mauser? Like I said, I'm a Mauser guy, and I heard on Danny and Aaron on MILSURP World's podcast that you had a Sporterized Swedish Mauser, one of your first.
That's true. Yeah.
So how come you didn't just get into Mausers? Your dad was into Japanese, fine. Mausers,
I mean, are you going to take offense at this?
not
Kind of.
real offense.
Oh,
Oh,
The problem,
boring as in like solid and consistent.
They're all the same with different crests on them.
Kind of.
I realize that's an exaggeration, but if you look at, like, when I started, the Forgotten Weapons, it's very specifically the weirdest, most unusual stuff I could find. And that's what always interested me, were things that are different. And so, honestly, one of the questions you haven't, because everybody does ask me about it, is why French? And largely the answer to why French is the French stuff is all different. To me, it's a lot more interesting than, it's 1920, and so 80% of the world is armed with the same Mauser 98 with different sling swivels and a different crest on it.
That is true. It's not as exciting, but it is, it's a solid, serviceable action.
Oh, would I take a Mauser 98 over a Lebel if I have to go into a gunfight? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm going to collect the Lebel.
All right.
yeah, that's fair. And so, since you got a Swede Mauser first,
I got rid of that. Actually, got rid of that thing a long time ago. That was a very sporterized rifle, and it just kind of seemed cool and handy. And then I discovered that was my first introduction to, sometimes ammunition is really a pain in the butt to get.
Yeah.
6 Swede was hard for me to find as a high schooler, and a big part of the reason I bought it was really cheap at the time, because it's a totally hacked up sporterized. It's ain't worth nothing. So
So if that didn't send you down the Mauser spiral, what was your second or third MILSURP? What kind of like triggered the itch?
To be honest, I don't remember what the rest of my early MILSURP rifles exactly were. Because to me, it was more about the historical time period that was interesting, not the specific guns. I got into MILSURP because World War I and World War II were really interesting, not because I thought a Mauser was a cooler gun than an AK, for example.
Okay, that's fair.
So a lot of the early ones you've already sold and moved on from. Then that means.
Yeah. Boy, if I thought about it really hard, I might be able to figure out which.
Well, how about this? What was your first French firearm?
My first really good French firearm was a Berthier cavalry carbine that I
All right.
got.
Nice.
It was one actually that I got in another batch from Rock Island. Um,
Uh,
I'll tell you what, those guys got their hooks into me with the regional auctions. I was buying a fair amount of stuff from them because for a while
so
you
you're
could,
the one buying the lots that have 9 guns in them.
a couple times, yeah. I tried to avoid the lines. Like I liked 4. Um, because the thing was, they'd put in one good gun to hook people, and 2 that are fine, and 1 piece of crap. Because well, whenever they buy up an entire collection or consign a whole collection, they'd have a bunch of 10% total garbage, but they have to move it. So, well, what do? We pair it up. You want the nice thing, you have to take this piece of garbage at the same time.
Yep.
And that there were people who weren't interested enough to be willing to deal with the other 3 or 4 guns in the lot. And they're like, well, I wanted that thing, but you know what? The lot costs twice as much as the one gun I want because there's 4 other guns in there and I don't want to deal with them. And so for a while, that was a good way to get some pretty darn good deals. And yeah.
Yeah. No, I've noticed when you do the math on some of those lots, it works out to your advantage there. If you
Yes.
buy 4 or 5 or 6 of them.
Yeah, sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. There are people who will get carried away and and they'll add up all the values and then, not maybe take into consideration the buyer's premium and then the shipping and then
Shipping,
oh well,
yeah.
I almost got it, so I'll just put in 2 more bids to make sure that I beat that guy, and that's what auction houses thrive on.
Yeah,
So
we've talked about it before where we're pretty good at setting our maxes and then walking away, and then we'll be sad later if we didn't get it. Don't chase.
exactly.
Yep.
So what I did at the time for those things was typically I'd have a whole list. I'd have like 24 lots that I was going to bid on, and I had maximums for them, and I do all the bidding on the phone because I couldn't put in bids ahead of time because I could only afford to get like 1 or 2 lots. And so I'd bid my maximum until hopefully I got one of them.
I was gonna say, what happened if you won like 6 of them?
Well, that's a problem. Then they come break your legs.
No, that's when you see, hi, I'm Ian at Rock Island, and he starts doing favors.
They won't let me leave until I film 18 more videos.
That's funny.
No. Now, part of the fun there with doing, I mean, obviously part of the reason that I started filming there is they had an insane quantity of stuff that I could pick really interesting. They always had a bunch of cool stuff, plenty for me to film for a week. But it also gave me the chance to look through the regional auction stuff while I was there and figure out, oh, what do I want to bid on? Probably the best thing I ever found at one of those auctions was a Gewehr 41 that had, I really can't authenticate it, but I got it.
Wait, a Mauser one or a
No, a Walther.
Walther? Okay.
It's a Walther, but it's got what appears to be a field armor welded on ZF-41 rail.
Ooh, that's cool.
And it was not mentioned anywhere in the description or the auction never mentioned it. And the side view of the gun, it was really hard to notice. In fact, I didn't notice it in the side view. The only reason I noticed it was there is because I was wandering through their racks. I went, oh, a G41. And I pulled it out. I'm like, what's this thing on the side? And, well, that's pretty cool. So I'll bid on that. And the gun had a badly sporterized stock on it. And so I ended up winning it because I think the stock dropped the value. And I don't think many other people noticed that it had that ZF-41 rail. So is it real? Is it fake? I don't really know, but it's cool. It's like it certainly didn't sell for the price that it should have if it was real. Like if someone faked it and was trying to get money out of it, they failed badly. So
Right. It wasn't going for sniper prices.
yeah. I tried to do that sort of thing other times without it working. Like I remember once I found a Schutztruppen Gewehr 98 in one of their regionals, which like it looks exactly like every other Gewehr 98 except the bolt handle's bent and it had a stock disc with the right secret code on it. And yeah, a lot of other people noticed that one too, actually. I did not get it.
Dang. So do they determine that what goes in a lot? Like you were saying that they throw in one junker with a few decent ones?
Yes. Yeah. So they choose the lotting. The things that like the considerations that go in, first off, every gun in the lot has to come from the same consigner because there's no way that they could split a lot price to multiple consigners. You know, how do you say which gun was worth what? It's impossible. So every lot is a single consigner. And then I don't know what their formula is. I never really talked to them in detail about that. But you look at those lots long enough and you're like, okay, obviously what they're doing is they're keeping a general theme to each lot, and there'll typically be something, there'll be a best item in the lot, and there'll be a piece of crap in the lot.
Yep. Well, they're doing something right because they are, I would say, the number one auction house.
Oh, they're making freaking money hand over fist.
Yeah.
And I've seen some of their shipping prices, so
Yes.
it
Yeah,
adds up.
it absolutely adds up. Yeah. Yeah, it's very easy to put in a bid at an auction. And actually, here's a perfect example for you. I found an auction that had East German helmets. I'm like, oh, I want to do a thing with a whole East German rig. I don't have a helmet. I've got the uniform, but I need a helmet. And here's this auction lot of 5 East German helmets, and they're all in like perfect brand new condition. And I put in a bid of $50. I'm like, no, who want? And I won it for $50 because nobody else really wanted these German helmets from a little auction house. Well, by the time I added on the shipping, the handling, the buyer's premium, the tax, and the credit card fee, those 5 helmets cost me $150. And
Yeah. They
like,
get you like that.
I immediately regret this.
The handling fee,
Yeah, I'm
whatever
like,
that
what
is.
handling fee? Come on. And then they show up in a box the size of like a coffee table because they've individually bubble wrapped every helmet and then filled the box with peanuts. I'm like, even if this was $50 now, I'd be pissed that I have to deal with 8 cubic feet of peanuts. All I wanted was one stupid helmet.
Did you really win?
No, I did not. And I left that auction a bit chastened. Not left, this was all online, but what I ended up doing was I kept one, I took the other 4 to a 2-gun match and stuck them on a bench at the front of the match with a sign $20 a piece. And
Perfect.
I sold them all for like 60. I think someone offered me, $30 for 2 of them kind of thing. But I got rid of my other 4 East German helmets.
All right, so we pried into your collection. I was glad though that it was mostly MILSURP, so that's good.
Yeah, it's like almost all MILSURP.
And so we were talking about, I think on the last podcast, about how a lot of us talk about writing a book. Like, oh, we should get together. We should write a book. A lot of people say it, but don't actually do it. And you did it 3 times. And so I'd just like to give you some credit just for that alone, getting it done.
Oh yeah.
Because it must have been
Thank you.
a hell of a project, just one of them.
I figured out the secret to it,
Ooh.
which is actually start it.
Ooh.
True.
Wait, so just talking about it, that's not enough?
Weirdly, it doesn't seem to actually lead to a book being written. But if you sit down and like start by writing out a table of contents, okay, what am I going to cover? What do I want to do here? And then you don't have to write it in order. Pick the thing that you're excited about at the moment. Like, oh, I just got a new 4956, and I got all interested in, I don't know, the sights on the 4956. So I'm going to write a section on the 4956 and do that. And the next day maybe it's Labelle magazine systems. Like, you don't have to write it in order. Just write something.
Interesting. Just write something.
And is it easier or harder to write a book with someone than on your own?
I don't know. I've never really done a collaborative book. Well, I've done collaborative books, but I've never done one where I shared the writing. So
Gotcha.
a bunch of my books have been collaborations with James Rupley on the photography, but that's him doing the photography and me doing the writing, and not really sharing the workload of the writing.
And so your Chassepot de Fromages book, the first one, I use as an example to some people to as what a book should be, because my mind works well when you have the small sections with the clear bold headings and the photographs over 2 pages and the charts, production charts, and the specification charts in the middle of the page. Like, no offense to Olson, I know he was great in his time, but the Olson bolt action book reads like a textbook.
Yes.
And the way your book, when I flip to, I want to look up a serial number. I want to, it's in bold right in the middle of the friggin' page. I love it.
Well, I think that's because we're both fairly similar in the collecting world. My intention with the book is I want to write a book where any French rifle that you will be able to find to buy, you can identify all the relevant, important information from this book. So I didn't try to get into all the prototypes. It's like, you're never going to find this stuff unless you're the curator of the Musée d'Armée in Paris. And frankly, it adds so much work to try and get all of that information for, I mean, this may sound, vulgarly practical, but do I really want to spend that much time and effort to get information that isn't actually really of much practical use to people? And the answer was no. So I stuck to basically standard production guns, including some pretty rare ones, but stuff that you'll actually find. And yeah, I love dates, serial numbers, production timelines. To me, that puts a lot of context into the gun.
And major changes that should be easy to find, like the bolt plug update on the MOS 36. I was like, what year was that? I was doing a trivia. I was like, and I know it's going to be in the book. It's going to take 2 seconds. And it was right there in the middle of the page. It said it's designed in 38, but not put in for a little while, though. I learned.
Yeah. So that was my intention with that book. The second one was a little different. The Chinese warlord pistols, because there just isn't any information on those.
You said about the Chassepot book that there wasn't a lot of English books. There was a lot of more in French on all that information. I would think the same with the China book. There's not a lot of English books on that.
Yeah.
There ain't nothing in no language on the Chinese stuff. I had a number of contacts in China that I tried to work with on that book. And frankly, we have more of the guns and we know more about them than the Chinese do these days.
Oh my gosh.
All that stuff in China got destroyed during the Cultural Revolution in the 50s. I couldn't find anything hardly. There are museums in China that have some of these guns on exhibit. I got pictures of a number of the museum collections, and they would include things like rubies. It kind of look like they're maybe from this period and this type of gun, but they're clearly not. Like, the Chinese museums don't really know. They can't properly identify what they've got at all.
Now the copies are pretty close, but you could still tell, though, right? I mean, they might look close, but how's the quality in general with the Chinese pistol copies?
It really runs the gamut. Some of them are outstanding, and some of them are horrifying. And it's because they were made by the whole gamut of production facilities. You literally could have, I've got one in the book that looks, if you squint a lot, it looks like a C96, but it's a single shot percussion gun. You cock the hammer back and there's a percussion nipple there.
Cool.
And it was clearly made by like one guy with a blacksmith forge and some rivets and some sheet steel. And at the other end,
cool.
factories that were set up with German and American technical assistance by the imperial government, before the Chinese Revolution, and they're making top quality stuff. And so it really was everything in between. The real genesis of that book was a friend of mine. So let me take a further step back. There's a U.S. Air Force general, retired, who spent 40 years collecting these pistols. That was his thing. And I think he's still around, but he's in fairly poor health. And a number of years ago, he was getting old, and he decided, like, I'm going to sell off my collection. I don't want my wife to have to deal with all this crap when I die. And he sold the entire collection.
Imagine her having to explain that. These very specific rare guns, what they are.
I got no idea what this is here.
Yeah. And the person she's telling probably doesn't know.
Oh yeah, and these are guns that everybody knows are garbage. Like, bless this guy for recognizing that they were interesting, because you hand those, mostly the C96 copies and the FN 1900 copies, you hand those to anyone who isn't intimately familiar with them, and they're like, "Oh, that's cool. You have a piece of garbage." This is horrible. The finish is crap. The grips are broken and missing. The gun doesn't work. The rifling is like milled backwards because they didn't have proper rifling cutters. They just wanted to make something that looked like rifling. Like, this is literal worthless crap. And yet Lou Curtis here recognized, he saw the interest in them, and that's fantastic. And I suspect he bought every one of them he ever found, because he had hundreds. And he sold the whole collection as a batch to a friend of mine. And, I've seen these guns. I think my first video on the Chinese pistols is like 2014 or 2015. And so I'd seen them. Rock Island, actually, here they come up again, had gotten a small collection of like 10 from some guy to sell. And so I did a video where I've got like a bunch of them. But that doesn't tell you anything. It's just every one of them is totally different.
I was gonna say, how many are the same as the other one? Like, is there any two the same?
So what became really interesting with this is when I got to look at 300 of these things all in one place, we started to see the patterns. Like, this is a pattern. Every gun is different, individually different, but they're all clearly made the same.
Okay.
Interesting.
There's one that's kind
of like the Mausers, the Chinese Mausers. The Chiang Kai-shek rifles.
The difference there is those are all factory guns. There are like four different versions of them, but they're all made by legit factories. They have serial numbers that make sense, that sort of thing. These are all, the best way I had it explained was, you'd have a factory that's, let's say it's a full-scale, proper factory, and they're making rifles. And Chinese armies didn't have a lot of officers. They didn't use many pistols. And so some warlord would come in and they're like, okay, I want 10,000 rifles and 50 pistols. And so what the factory would do is they'd set up a production line to make the rifles, as we would in Europe or in the US. But you don't set up a production line to make 50 pistols. They'd take like their 5 best machinists, and each one of those guys has to make 10 pistols.
That is funny.
And so they're basically all going to be to the same pattern, but every gun is individually handmade, and so they all come out looking a little bit different.
It's like a Netflix game show.
It could. Yeah. And people look at these and they're like, oh, every gun's different, therefore whoever made them is an incompetent rube. Some of the guys were incompetent rubes. Some of them were really quite skilled machinists. Some of these are really well-made guns. Now, the markings are usually going to be total gibberish, because your competency as a machinist is completely unrelated to whether or not you speak English if you happen to live in China in 1925. The other thing I'll tell people is, like, if I ask you, like, here's a Chinese gun with some Chinese characters marked on it. Now I'm going to take it away. Now you make a pistol and mark it in Chinese. Like, you're going to end up with total nonsense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, I would. I can't tell it. I put that character in flipped left to right or upside down. I can't tell. I don't read that stuff. It's no different.
Like, I remember one of the ones you have, the FN, the Belgian FN. It's like, it's not an F. It's some other letter. But exactly. You can tell it's trying to be an FN.
Yeah, some of those are hilarious. Like I remember seeing one where I guess the only thing they remembered was FN, so it's just FN, 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 FN.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, over and over.
Yeah. So there are some cultural issues there, but the quality is not necessarily related to the
But
market.
you're still not shooting these things, are you?
A few of them I will.
Ooh.
So I have the Shanghai Arsenal, which was a legit arsenal, made a fascinating sort of variant on the FN 1900. So the FN 1900 was formally adopted by the Chinese Imperial Army before the revolution. It was in China, it was known, and it became sort of a standard. Like everybody knows the FN 1900, know it's really good, so we're going to make copies of that. And that and the C96 are by far the most common guns. Like 50, 60, maybe 70% of all of these pistols are clones of 1900s or C96s. The Shanghai Arsenal took the FN 1900, they lengthened the barrel to 6 inches, they gave it a 500-meter tangent rear sight, they stretched the grip so it has a 10-round single stack mag, and they put a shoulder stock slot on it.
Whoa.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
They're ahead of their time.
And I have a video on that, by the way. And the Shanghai Arsenal was a real arsenal. They made a couple thousand of these things. And I have one of them. And that I took to a match and shot it. And it ran pretty nicely. And I have no concerns about safety on that. The individual artisanal stuff, a lot of it's going to be fine, but I just can't tell. You can't tell what the heat treat is from just looking at the outside. So the rest of them, no, I don't shoot.
So I didn't realize that this year you had a third book come out with some more beautiful photos that I saw there, the Small Arms of World War II. So,
yes.
Are we going to have now a Small Arms of World War One and Civil War? Are we getting a whole collection here?
My list making and collecting gene would say, oh yeah. Oh, I'll make a huge list of all the different books that can be in this series. But the realistic answer is we do plan to have 6 volumes on World War II.
Oh, shit.
One for each of the major combatants. So I have actually, I don't think I've told anyone this, so you've got a scoop here. I have just finished doing the first draft of Russia, World War II Russia.
Oh, shit. All right.
So that'll be the second one. And then we're also going to do Germany, UK, Italy, and Japan.
Very nice.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
I was kind of wondering when I first heard about this. 'Cause I'm like, oh, isn't this kind of a saturated market? Until I saw the pictures, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, so that's a very legitimate question. Like, really, you can't go find information on U.S. World War II guns anywhere? And there kind of isn't anything that has the pictorial quality of what we did. And what I tried to do was to get better information than your standard sort of Barnes and Noble, printed in the 90s coffee table sort of book. Like, I know I grew up with a bunch of those and I loved them as a kid, but when I look back at them now, I'm like, there's some problems with this. And they generally, like, they were written, I don't want to call them content farms, but I feel like they weren't really written by collectors, by people who had a really deep knowledge of the subject matter. So there's a lot of stuff that gets left out. And what we wanted to do with these is cover all of the standard weapons and then also pretty much all the second tier sort of weapons. So the World War II one has Victory model revolvers. It has the Colt and Smith 1917 revolvers.
And how deep with the info that, as far as back to my charts?
No charts.
Do we have no charts here? But do you you explain the years of production and all that in general, or
generally, but not exhaustively. Where Chasse Pot de FAMAS was very much intended to be a book for collectors to understand French rifles. This series is intended to be a book for people who think World War II is pretty cool and guns are pretty cool. And hey, what if I had a book, not the collectors, but a more, I don't want to call it amateur, makes it sound insulting, pejorative, and it's not. It is a book for people who are less deep into the rabbit hole already. Someone who has an M1 Garand.
Right, like most World War II coffee table books will not have the gas trap in there. I'll just say that.
Right, and we have the gas trap. We
And you have
have
the gas trap.
so some of the more exotic stuff we've got in there. We have the high standard silenced 22s. We have the M2 submachine gun. We have the UD-42. We actually have the
You have a
45 caliber.
rising.
Yeah, oh yeah. 3 different versions of the rising. We've got the early, the late, and the folding stock. We have the 45 caliber version of the M42, the United Defense 42, the Marlin 42, there's 3 different companies involved in that thing. But they initially submitted it to the Army in 45. And the Army was like, oh, this is fine, but we're good on submachine guns. Like, we got the simplified M1 Thompsons, so no thanks. So then they made it in 9mm, sold a whole pile of them to the Dutch, just in time for the Dutch colonies to be taken over by the Japanese. And so you end up with like 15,000 UD-42s sitting on a dock with nowhere to go. And then the OSS buys most of them to drop into Europe. So we've got that in there.
See, that's a good history. That's not just a regular coffee table history. That's
Yeah.
a collector
Exactly.
history.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, if you went out and bought a ricing, and you're like, I want to know everything about this ricing. Yeah, this isn't going to be the book that'll tell you that. This book will tell you why the ricing is relevant and a bit about what happened to it, where it was used, probably how many were made. If there's any interesting stories about the designer or the factory or the process of adopting it, that's in there.
Yeah, and people will see the rising and go, wait, that looks cool. I need to get one of those.
Yeah.
That's probably what's going to happen from it. The rare one.
I've wanted a ricing for a long time. Like, ever since I set foot on Guadalcanal, I've wanted a ricing.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I'm surprised you don't have one, to be honest. You have the Scody, I noticed.
I did. I actually got rid of that rifle.
What?
No.
I don't get rid of a lot. So I traded that rifle to
Trade even.
Yeah. Well, all right. So here's the thing. I got that Scody because it showed up in a gun shop in Tombstone, Arizona. Like, it was a little shop that had way more interesting stuff more regularly than it had any right to. And they had this Scody, and it wasn't that expensive. I got a decent deal on it. And it's weird and cool, but Italian guns aren't my thing. Like, I wasn't really, it's so rare that I didn't want to shoot it much. And I felt like it's kind of sitting here out of place in my collection. And then I happened to find out that Reed Knight wanted a Scody and didn't have a Scody.
All right.
And he wanted one for the most nerdy collector reason ever. This is such a Reed Knight thing. He had a 20mm Scody aircraft cannon. And he wanted the rifle to go with it.
That's funny.
Wow. It's not like a cheap last ditch Arasaka. It's a, multiple $1,000 gun.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So I ended up trading it to him for a Portuguese AR-10.
Ooh, nice.
He had a lot of that sort of stuff. And that was something that I really wanted at the time.
So that was another question we had about your collection. How much of it is like just the normal standard issue rifles, and how much is it like the weird stuff like the Scodies, or I guess Mazda 38 is not that weird, but it's full auto, so it gets into the weird category in the US.
Yeah. Most of it is standard. I don't, because it's much easier. I mean, the standard stuff's cheaper. It's a lot easier for me to pick that stuff up than to try and get every weird and crazy and highly desirable rare thing. So I try to get the weird stuff whenever I can. But no, most of my stuff's fairly standard, which is maybe kind of depressing now.
All right. Now is a good time, I think, to talk to you about what's got to be the most exciting thing going on in your MILSURP life right now. The History of Weapons in War app and website over at weaponsandwar.tv. Very exciting.
I am excited about it, and it's going really well, which is even more exciting.
You said you wanted to have a historical educational firearm channel, and you have Bloke on the Range, British Muzzleloaders, Legacy Collectibles, Royal Armories, the Armorer's Bench, 9-hole reviews, Cap and Ball. I mean, these guys, most of them are what I think of historical educational, so that's pretty perfect.
That's what we were going for. Honestly, the biggest surprise to me was the British Royal Armories. Like, you know what? They fit, they fit the context of what we're trying to get, but they're, a huge government bureaucracy. But we might as well ask them. And it turned out they were super excited and interested, and it was fantastic to have them on board.
Yeah, the armories, great photos. They have
Yes.
such. They do have a lot of stuff, and I was excited to see them on there. It's really good.
My collection, by the way, is nothing compared to the Royal Armories collection. Just to be clear about that. Although there's French stuff that I have that they don't, because weirdly, being British, they haven't gone out of their way to have a super complete French collection.
Wow, still got that rivalry going.
Yeah.
Always, yeah. So the gestation of history of weapons and war was essentially that YouTube sucks. That YouTube has been changing their rules, always for the worse, and often without any warning. It's pretty obvious YouTube doesn't like gun content. They're nervous about firearms content and their advertiser relationships. And
Yep.
It seems pretty clear to me that there is not a long-term future for good firearms content on YouTube. And
when they strike your channel and you can't even talk to a person about it and explain it, that tells you they don't care that much.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so it's a little more mundane than that. The thing that really got me, the push that got me to do this, to set up my own streaming platform and service for this sort of content, was like over a year ago now, like a year and a half ago now, April of last year. They made a change in the back end to their algorithm that they've never talked about. I can't ask anyone about it, but I can very clearly see its effect basically overnight. And it was to dramatically reduce the number of older videos that they would recommend to people. So on YouTube, the vast majority of a channel's views come from YouTube actually recommending a video. So whether it's, the couple of videos that come up in the player screen after one video finishes, or that little sidebar of suggested videos, that's where the vast majority of everybody's views come from. There are people out there who will go Google, I want to see the Schwarzlosa 1901. Maybe there's something on that. And they'll type in Schwarzlosa 1901 and they'll find a video and they'll watch it. But that is a tiny fraction. And it was like,
so people stumble upon you most is how they find you? Based on the recommendations?
No, so the recommendations will recommend new content now. But they used to be really good about recommending older content. Like it used to be 80% of my channel views were older material. And that's dropped to about 50%. Views on new videos haven't really changed. So it was a dramatic reduction in how much they would offer people or suggest to people older videos. And my whole intention in doing this, really from the beginning, was to create a living encyclopedia of primarily military firearms history. And the idea was like, once I do a video, people will see it forever, like the information's there. And that worked really well until April of last year, when essentially they changed to, we don't really care what you did a year ago. We don't care if the content is still valid. We're only really interested in fresh new material. And so it dramatically reduced the views on the channel.
Like with the shorts.
Yeah. The shorts are a separate thing. I freaking hate shorts.
Yeah, they're annoying.
No one likes them.
They want to be TikTok. Now it's short. What I wanted to do with History of Weapons and War is not just put all of these different creators in the same place, but have a way to manually curate content. So I can say, here's a playlist on the FAL. Are you interested in the FAL? Here's different variations of the FAL. Here's FALs at the range. And the cool thing of having multiple creators is I can do, say, my desktop teardown on some exotic weird FALs, and then you can go over and see Henry and Josh at 9-hole actually running FALs on their long range course, their speed course. How do these things actually perform? Really a different look at the same firearm.
Will there be any data, any like documents or data also on the FAL, let's say?
Not at this point. No, it's just video at this point. I have a separate project that's been in the works for a while to have an archival website. That was in development for like 2 years, and it well, not kind of, it totally stalled out. Like, I just was not happy with the way the interface was going. It'll still happen, but I'm not sure when at this point. But what History of Weapons of War lets me do is manually curate the content to show people videos from yesterday alongside videos from 10 years ago, because they are the same subject matter and they're relevant to each other. And that's something that YouTube used to do pretty well, and it just doesn't now.
And so you're hosting all 4,000 plus, I think you said you had?
Yep. Yeah. It's a subscription only platform, so it's $10 a month. And that cost goes to a couple of places. I wish I just got to pocket it all, but I don't. It goes to actually paying the back end. The system's run by Vimeo. And so we pay for video hosting on 4,000 videos. And then about 3/4 of the money is actually divided up between the other channels that are on the platform. So the other thing that this was a combination of several different motivating factors. And one of the other ones was I've been very lucky. I've been blessed, you might say, that Forgotten Weapons became a huge channel and became very successful and is very successful. I don't know that it could become that successful if I started it from scratch today. We have a lot of other channels that are doing content that's equally good from an educational perspective, from a research perspective. Some of them do much better research than I do. I tend to do less in-depth videos because they're more often. And, we've got some people on History of Weapons of War who are spending significant amounts of time doing primary source research on video subjects, which is awesome. And I want to encourage that. And the only way to make that sustainable long-term is to give some of these creators a way to actually make money from what they're doing, ideally to the point that if they want to, they can quit their day jobs and make, historical firearms research a full-time occupation. And today on YouTube, if you don't have 500,000 subscribers, it's not going to happen. Like, you're just not going to make that revenue, especially with the changes to their algorithms.
Right. And we take for granted that YouTube is still around letting everyone on there because, they can kick everyone tomorrow.
And I think they will at some point. Like,
So
maybe it'll be 5 years from now. Literally,
right.
for all I know, it could have happened to me right now while we're recording this podcast, and I'll find out by email when we sign off. Like,
You're struck.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. But I'm also pretty sure the situation's not going to be the same in 5 years that it is now. I just don't know when the change is going to happen. So,
Okay. So it's kind of a preemptive move. So you're kind of mirroring your YouTube, but you also said you're going to have exclusive content though, right? That's only on the app.
yes.
And probably there's some stuff on YouTube you can't do, right? There's some reloading things you can't do.
Exactly. Bloke on the Range has already started doing some reloading videos that are exclusive to the app. I think, app and Patreon, I believe, but they're not on YouTube proper. I have a playlist of videos that I can't post on YouTube for various reasons. We're not doing a ton of exclusive content because I do want to strike this balance of, like, the point of the channel is to make this information freely and readily available. But at the same time, I want to make sure that there's a place for it to exist in the future when YouTube does finally squash it. So yes, it is. Part of it is very much preemptive, because if I wait until YouTube puts the hammer down on all of us, it's too late then to set something up. So we have to set it up in advance, and that's what I decided to actually just bite the bullet and do.
Yeah, hearing about it makes a lot more sense, because I was picturing like, well, I mean, Full 30 existed for a little bit, and like, Patreon kind of exists, so there's like free content or like the special content there. But hearing it now, kind of combining those two ideas into one, and like, I really like that idea of like sorting by firearm or something like that, to have like all the different content in one.
And we have hundreds of playlists sorting content. Like, we spent a really long time setting this up, categorizing all of the videos that we have to do that sort of curation. We'll never unsubscribe you, by the way, from random channels that you wanted to follow, which is a common thing that YouTube does.
Yeah.
You show up, the top on the page is the newest video that day from all of our channels. and we have a most recent published basically headline bar. It looks kind of like Netflix. So at the very top, most recent videos from newest going backwards from all the channels mixed together. And then below that are different types of playlists. So you can look by type of gun, you can look by country, and then all sorts of other categories and criteria.
Again, I'm a sucker for a playlist and any list. So
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
got playlists.
I love it.
whenever I buy a new gun, the first thing I do is go look up all the videos I can watch on it.
Yep.
Awesome.
And so I assume this isn't all the creators that you're gonna stick with. There'll be more to come in the future, or is this the main group?
For the time being, the group is the group. We have nicely passed our break-even point, so which is good. I had to start this with a 2-year contract with Vimeo, so I can totally guarantee you it'll be running for another 2 years because I'm paying for it for 2 years regardless. But we have passed the point where the income is enough to actually pay for the hosting and the back end residual costs, and we're able to pay out. We're making nice payments out to the other content creators, which is awesome. Honestly, it makes me extremely happy to be able to send money to all of these people who are spending so much time and effort on this passion project, and be able to be like, hey, that was awesome. Here's $2,000.
That must be great, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now, in the long term, I would love to have this as a way to help new creators. I already said I don't think I could create Forgotten Weapons on YouTube today the way I did 10 years ago.
Yeah. What about new channels like podcasts and guys like maybe a New York guy with a Texan, something like
Yeah,
that?
yeah, something like that.
I just don't have a mechanism for it yet. Well, part of the problem is
Yeah, you
it's a
said that on the Q&A. I heard that.
it's a profit sharing thing. So the money that we bring in is divided between the channels that are there, which means if we bring in a new channel, it takes a cut off of everyone else's money, which doesn't mean we're not going to do it, doesn't mean we can't do it, but it means we have to be a little careful about it. And I'm not willing to do that until we have more income coming in.
Let's say someone wanted to come in for the publicity, and then you get this channel. Are you then have to pay for more hosting each time you that, or you have like a whole like a set blanket amount of space for all your videos for the 2 years?
It's two-part. We have a flat fee that we have to pay for the hosting that gives us a certain amount of allowed content, which we negotiated to be way more than necessary. So we're fine.
So you can put out as many videos as you want and be covered.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we pay
that's awesome.
we pay a fee per subscriber as well. And so that's how it makes sense for Vimeo. Like the flat fee covers their administrative people and some of the hardware, and then the per subscriber fee essentially pays for the bandwidth. So if we had a channel that wanted to come in and they're like, hey, I just want to be associated with all these other cool people, and I don't give me a cut of the profit. That's
Right.
kind of a brainer. Like, okay, it's not really fair to that channel, which is like, I'd want to know.
For new channels, sometimes that's like a way, that people give them a little vision, and then they blow up on their own.
But when we do that, we need to make sure that we have a roadmap for how to bring them on full time if they turn out to be really good.
Right.
Like, I don't want to bait and switch. Like, thanks for doing it for free. Now you can just leave.
Or they get real popular and then they leave. See ya.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, that's part of the long-term goal.
It's a little fluid. You're sticking with this, but
honestly, it was kind of like the book. It's like I want to start with the maximum number of, like, here's my list of channels that are appropriate to it. I want to get as many of them as possible, and then expend the effort to get the 80%, 90% best I can, and then start there. Let it grow.
That sounds like the plan.
The only one we're missing that I wanted to have is See an Arsenal.
Yes, I heard you talk about that, but the way Athias talks about it, he thinks he's worried about the whole situation too, and it seems like he's just kind of waiting it out. I don't know. But like we said, the YouTube might kick everyone off tomorrow.
Yeah, he is more than welcome at any time. Like, I'd love to have him. We planned on having him, so it's not a money thing. If he changes his mind, he and May, they have an open door anytime.
That would be awesome. So we talked about the app and the books, but ever since you went to that Finnish Army Museum, I think it was like a year ago, I've been hearing that you're going to write a Finnish small arms book.
Yes, that's my next major project.
Oh, shit. I thought maybe the Russian book took it over or something.
But it did for a time. We had a number of other projects that came up, and the Finnish book is going to be the most significant, difficult thing that I've ever done.
Oh, no. You like doing that to yourself.
Apparently, yeah. Yeah, because why not? All I'm doing is publishing other books and helping run the publishing company and, posting 4 videos a week. There's so much free time. I ought to just, also write another big research book.
Yep. I can't believe it. All right, that's great news.
So what I told James Rupley, the photographer collaborator for the small arms stuff, is we'll do US, and then I'll write the second World War II book, and then I'm shifting gears to Finland because I've been really want to do this book on Finland. It's a really cool topic to me. I'm excited about it. The photography is completely done. Like James and I, over the last 2 years,
nice.
we've done a shitload of photography for this book, and it's going to cover. I had a little bit of a uh-oh moment when I saw that Wet Dog is printing a book on Finnish Mauser MILSURP.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Shit.
And I'm excited to see it, but it is not a problem for the project I have in mind because I'm going to cover all Finnish small arms. So we're doing rifles, pistols, submachine guns, and light machine guns.
Okay.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. So
Great.
that was kind of an interesting table of contents to figure out at the beginning of the project, because if you look, the Finns kind of used everything. Like, there's Beretta 34s that were used by Finland, and C96s, and high powers, and CZ27s, and CZ38s, I think, and Koshas, and Carcanos, and it's like, how do I put all this in one? Like, you just can't. It'd be huge. It'd be 3 volumes long, like the book in Finnish. And so the conclusion that I came to is I'm going to cover guns that were either manufactured or mechanically modified in Finland.
And they were all business, because when you see a stock where when they do the fingered groove, 2-piece stock, they'll put the front a different color wood completely than the back. They didn't care. It was business.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yes, there's
They
very
weren't
many
matching.
right there. Their unpleasant Eastern neighbor.
But yeah, that whole those Finnish small arms, I didn't realize all this was going on.
Yeah. And then after the Mosins, you've got the Finnish AKs, what we typically call Valmets. And there was a whole series of those, both military and commercial. And so we're covering all of those. They had 2 light machine guns. They had the LS-26 early on. They had the KVKK 62 after World War II. So we're covering those. Their famous submachine guns are the Suomis. And then they also had a copy of the Russian PPS-43s. So we're covering those, plus a few smaller guns. Like, they did a copy of the Bergman 1920 called the Lindelof. We've got that in the book. And then we're not doing heavy machine guns, so I'm not getting into Mosin or to Maxims.
So you just have to write, right? Because you're saying all the photography's done, so you just have to do the writing part.
Yeah, you sound just like James.
So get on it.
On 1 or 2 occasions, he has completely, just innocently and very seriously said, "Oh yeah, that book's done. It just has to be written." Because
I didn't mean it like that simple. I just meant, like,
but yeah,
you no longer have to attain, right? That was because I used to think that was kind of the hard part, is getting the rifles that you have to photograph and getting to this, getting there and getting access.
It absolutely is. And we took a couple trips to Finland. We've done photography. Frankly, we did photography with the Finnish Army Museum. We did photography with Sacco. Obviously, they've been around basically as long as Finland has been a country. And we did photography with some private collectors.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we got freaking everything. It's fantastic.
Any crazy like secret things that were in the army, Finnish Army Museum basement?
So it's not the basement, by the way. It's
Oh,
basically an underground cave air raid shelter complex,
that's
which is
better.
freaking cool. Yeah. Also, not heated, which made it wonderful for photography because the lights mean that we're pretty much always sweating when we're taking pictures, and that was the most comfortable place to do photography we've yet had. But I was a little sad I was not able to get photographs of the flamethrower with a Suomi mounted to it.
Oh, that's too bad.
That was a little bit of a bummer. There's some really, I mean, there's some really freaking cool MILSURP stuff in there. You know, do you know the Finnish M27 cavalry carbines? They had their extra short version of the M27.
No, I
I've
didn't know
not heard
that.
of those.
They had a cavalry version of the M91 before that. We've got pictures of that. They had a whole pile of experimental sniper rifles. We got those. There's cool versions of everything.
Ski troopers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Kind of a misnomer, but yes. So people usually, when they say ski trooper, they're usually referring to the M27s that have double sling slots.
Yeah.
In them, which is actually, that was just the standard rifle at the beginning of production. And it was for a sling that you could use to sling the rifle kind of backpack style. It was a multi-purpose sort of sling. And then it didn't take very many before they realized this is not really that much benefit and it's a pain in the butt to make. And so they stopped doing it. The actual ski trooper guns are the ones that have a slot in the front and a rotating swivel at the back.
Okay.
Because that was the more conducive cross-country skiing sling arrangement.
See, I need a Finnish small arms book, so I'm waiting for your book.
Well, in the meantime, mine will be, I expect, a solid 2 years away. So I think it's going to take me a good year to do it, and then the better part of a year to do all the publishing. So in the meantime, buy the book from Wet Dog.
Right.
I don't know the name, and I apologize. I don't offhand. But get that one. It's going to cover the Mosums, which is the most relevant thing for most of the American collector market.
Yep, I got that one on pre-order, so we'll see how it is.
Me too. I'm excited to see it.
Matt DeRosio.
Okay. I do not know him.
All right.
I mean, not that I necessarily should, but in the meantime, I've been building a Finnish rifle collection, which is a lot of fun too.
Nice.
The one thing that I have for mine that I suspect he doesn't, I kind of hope he doesn't just because it'd be cool to be exclusive on it. Sako has an original like advertising flyer for the M2830 because they sold the things commercially as well. So they had a standard pamphlet talking about why it's the greatest new gun and why you should send yours in and send in your old 28 and get it upgraded, or your M91 and get it upgraded. And the one they have at Sako is signed by every member of the engineering team.
Ooh.
That's so cool. So, I mean,
that's awesome.
Obviously, pictures of that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, so we're waiting for the Finland book, but
So, speaking of follow-up books, are you planning on doing a follow-up to your Chinese Warlord pistol book with a Chinese rifle book?
Ooh.
I would say half no and half yes, I already did.
Ooh.
Dolph Gold, about 30 years ago, wrote a monograph. It's like 50 pages long on Chinese Warlord era Mauser rifles. And it was spiral bound and like mimeographed. And I don't know how many copies he printed, but it was probably like 100. And when we were doing the Warlord pistol project, like I never actually even managed to own a copy of this book myself, but a friend of mine did, and I had scanned his, so I had a copy of it electronically. And I wrote to him and got his permission to reprint his monograph as an actual bound book. And so we printed it alongside Pistols of the Warlords.
Oh, that's cool.
He called it Arming the Dragon. And there were a few changes, like we updated a few bits. There was some new information that had come out, some corrections, but that's got basically all the standard sort of information on the factory made Chinese warlord Mausers. And it's a cheap book too, because it's tiny. It's like 4 by 7 inches, I think, and about 50 pages. So
All right, so you're like the Chinese arms expert
well,
at
they're
this point.
interesting.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
I don't have a collection of the Mausers myself. I have one. I have a Hanyang 88 that I picked up many, many years ago. The rest of my Chinese collection is just the pistols.
And I was talking to my wife and I said that your nickname was Gun Jesus, and she said, which I never really thought of before, has any religious organization ever, contacted you for blasphemy over taking the Lord's name in vain in a way?
Organization? No. Every
Uh-oh.
once in a while, I'll get comments from someone who's like, "You're some kind of asshole. Like, that's wrong. Why would you do that?" And well, frankly, I just ignore them. But it is not a nickname that I chose for myself. It's one that was sort of given to me. And you know what? You don't really get to pick your nickname on the internet, and it could be a lot worse than that. So I'll take it.
The community has spoken.
All right, everyone, it's time for some MILSURP trivia.
Oh boy.
I made this one an easy version today to be just a fun way to bring up some cool firearms to talk with Ian. Sometimes people get it right, sometimes they get it wrong, but today's trivia here is based off your channel, so I'm pretty sure you're going to get them correct. All right, so here we go. Number 1. The Forgotten Weapons most popular YouTube video overall, and 3 of the top 4 are of these types of firearms.
Well, machine guns.
Correct.
Number one, I believe, minigun.
Yes. So
not that I'm narcissistically looking at my stats every day and hitting refresh, but
yeah, who would do that?
But this says a lot about your audience. I was thinking that 3 of the top 4 are insane machine guns, but I have to know, is it as fun? Like, is it the most fun type of gun to shoot? A machine gun, I guess even the M134, but
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Now,
it has to be.
it helps that like my favorite thing to shoot is a light machine gun. So, like magazine fed rifle caliber light machine gun is about my favorite category.
Give me a specific one then. Which one?
Oh, the Bren, the Lewis, the
Oh,
BAR,
nice.
the Degtyarev, that stuff. And it's mostly World War I, World War II era.
Interesting. And the M134, do you feel like what is the feeling when you're unloading on that truck, that pickup?
The minigun is, yes, a massive vibration. In fact, if you watch the video, I left it in because I found it hilarious. I wanted to get a shot of the front end of the gun, a muzzle on shot. And so I took my camera on a tripod, and the whole gun was mounted on a 2-axle trailer, with its batteries and its ammo. There's a lot of infrastructure for a minigun, by the way. And so I stuck my camera on the front end of the trailer and fired off a burst with the thing. And when I got home and looked at the footage, the moment I opened fire, the video feed went to total blur because of the vibration in the trailer going up through the tripod legs. And it showed nothing. And frankly, I found it hilarious and left that clip in the video. But with the minigun, it's just vibration.
But it's still full controllable though, huh?
Yes and no. So yes, it is. But especially like you need a little bit of practice, and it's hard to get practice at 6,000 rounds a minute. Someone will say, "Oh, do you want to have a try with the minigun?" And is 100 rounds. And so you generally don't get much practice. And with a regular normal machine gun, you can kind of start shooting. Okay, that's the recoil. Push back into the gun, bring it under proper control, and then bring it on target. And if you do that process on a minigun, it's like 1,000 rounds downrange.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, that looked like a blast.
And by the way, I would say that the top couple of videos on the channel tell you literally nothing about the audience. What that tells you is what videos are the non-audience people watching, because the
I hear
audience is
you.
a smaller core group that'll watch all the videos. The people who just show up for one video, most likely thing they're going to watch is the minigun because it's spectacle.
All right. Question 2. The most popular Forgotten Weapons YouTube video that is not a machine gun is this
Oh,
Star Wars looking H&K G11, which used this type of unique ammunition that never quite caught on, but sounds good on paper.
oh, that's too easy. That's caseless.
I
Yeah,
so,
the caseless.
so I wanted to ask. I don't know the whole story of why no one else went to caseless, because it does sound like a cool idea.
A lot of people tried it. There were a couple of problems with caseless ammo that turned out to be probably not insurmountable, but too expensive and difficult to surmount to make it practical to continue with. One of them, so of course, you don't have a cartridge case. So instead, your powder is the case. So you have to somehow the powder has to form a composite solid block. It can't be powder; it has to be a solid unit. Um,
Ah,
what happens when it breaks? Like if you have a round crack in the gun, how do you get it out? Because there's no extractor, because there's no case. So if the round breaks, or if it just doesn't fire for some reason, you have to have some mechanism to get the the unspent broken round out. And
oh.
that's tricky because I mean normally part of the goal is you're getting rid of that sort of component because you don't need it. Another
And that was
issue.
something that happened often, that the case would get stuck in there, or it was just like thinking
No, not
ahead.
not super often, but it would happen. Like imagine you're running any other gun and you have no extractor. Like it doesn't you don't lose a case very often, but what happens when you do? And
Right.
these are all military arms. So okay, so it only happens 1 in 1,000 rounds. Well, you've got 1,000 guys in the field. Every time they all pull the trigger, someone's going to have their gun just stop working without a way to fix it. Um,
So
one,
this was a short-lived idea then.
um, it keeps coming around cyclically. Uh, honestly, the most successful caseless rounds are the ones from like the Civil War. The Volcanic was a caseless um,
Oh,
cartridge,
cool.
where instead of trying to come up with a block of composite powder with a bullet embedded in it, they took a big lead bullet, hollowed it out, and stuffed the powder inside the base of the bullet. So the problem with those is that they were underpowered because you just couldn't fit much powder into the thing.
Right,
Um,
right. You need the full
and they did
case.
have that. They did have that same issue of how do you get a stuck round out, and the answer there was use a cleaning rod and you just knock it out the back of the gun. But
That's annoying.
yeah, heat was also an issue. That brass cartridge case, yeah, I don't know if you've ever touched one straight out of a gun, but it takes a lot of heat with it.
Right.
And when you don't have that, all that heat is more of that heat is going into the parts of the gun. I don't think that's quite as significant of a problem, but it was an issue that had to be
I guess,
overcome.
yeah, after thousands of rounds.
Yeah, surprising how
And,
much it adds up.
and
Yeah.
often caseless guns are done in combination with very high rates of fire. The concept of having a system where you can fire 2 or 3 rounds before the recoil impact hits the shooter. So your 3 round burst is all fired at basically the same point of impact,
Oh, that's
which
cool.
again sounds really cool, but it turns out to be really pretty hard to actually pull off.
Oh, well. So how was the G11 looked at in history?
The quote I got actually from a guy from Mauser once at SHOT Show was that when Germany reunified, West Germany had the option of either adopting the G11 or rebuilding East Germany, and they chose to rebuild East Germany because it would be cheaper.
All right.
That's pretty
The
good.
G11 is seen as I
There
think,
goes the G11.
thank God they didn't adopt it because can you imagine what they'd be dealing with if they had adopted it?
All right. Poor G11. All right. Question 3. The oldest forgotten weapons video on YouTube where Ian actually shoots a firearm is the one where he shows off this interesting semi-automatic rifle that probably didn't catch on because of things like the fact that the action locks in sideways and the barrel's offset to the left, and because of its cool method of closing the action using the trigger.
That would be the ZH-29.
Yes, and the thing I found interesting was this was submitted to the U.S. in 276 Pedersen for the U.S. trials,
Mhm.
and so what was? Did they give a reason why they said no? Was it this kind of stuff?
No, it wasn't that. I honestly don't remember exactly what it was about the ZH-29 in US trials that got it picked out. In general, it's actually a pretty good gun compared to the other stuff that was being floated around at the time. It did make some sales. China bought them. Ethiopia, of all people, bought them. And there were a number of other small sales, and a lot of people tested it. Basically, everybody tested the ZH-29. Like even the Japanese had a copy of it that they tested, if I remember correctly.
So that whole sideways action worked fine.
Yeah, yeah. It probably had some long-term issues, like long-term maintenance durability issues, but nothing immediate. Frankly, I'd love to have a ZH-29. Here's a fun trivia fact about that video, by the way. That video was terrifically awful in quality with a terrible microphone and a ton of wind, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And years later, probably close to 10 years later, 8 years later, the guy who owned that rifle sadly passed away, and his collection was auctioned off by the James Julia Auction Company, with whom I was filming at the time. And I did a new video, a much better redo of that ZH-29 video using the exact same rifle.
That's kind of cool.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, that is cool.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that was another question I was going to ask is like, do you plan on redoing some of your older videos to up the quality? But I guess that answers that.
I don't redo a lot of them. I'll redo them if I missed a significant piece of information, or if the quality was just really bad. And the ZH-29, like, there's a whole batch of half a dozen videos I did in one range trip, including the ZH-29. And I've redone a lot of them, and any I haven't redone yet are on the list to be redone.
All right, question 4. The Forgotten Weapons most popular video of a Mauser, my favorite, is this big boy that I've sat at home jealous and watched you shoot dozens of times as you tested the penetration power of its expensive 13 millimeter rounds.
You are making these too easy. That is, of course, the
Yeah.
Tank.
Yeah. Everyone knows the Tigger.
Well, some of it's just to chit chat about these things. Like I was curious, like how much of an impact on the war did all these anti-tank guns, like the boys anti-tank rifle and the WZ-35, like did they really have an effect on the war, or was it just like
Some did, some did. Those two did not. Really, the Tank of Air, not a ton, a little bit. I'd say the Tank of Air was more useful than the boys, probably. What the Germans discovered the best way to deal with British tanks is to hide a 77 millimeter field gun behind a bush and wheel it out and just direct fire it into the side of the tank.
That'll do it.
that's pretty good?
The anti-tank rifles that were the most useful, had the most impact on the war, were the two Russian ones, the PTRS and the PTRD. And that's largely because they made hundreds of thousands of them, and they gave them to freaking everybody. And the projectile, so that's a 14.5 by 114 millimeter cartridge that is still used in anti-aircraft machine guns to this day, although not as effective as it used to be. It fires, if I remember off the top of my head, a 972 grain tungsten ceramic composite armor-piercing bullet at over 3,000 feet per second.
Oh,
It's
that'll work.
Holy crap. The guns are literally 7 feet long. They are massive.
And you're saying hundreds of thousands of them.
Hundreds of thousands of those things.
So that can make an impact. Yes.
So those things would defeat the frontal armor on a Panzer III, maybe a Panzer IV. And they could go through side and rear armor on a lot of bigger vehicles. They would really mess up half tracks, scout cars, all that sort of stuff. Uh, and they were deployed in quantities where you'd have multiple anti-tank gunners all firing on a group of German vehicles simultaneously from different angles. The PTRS is a semi-automatic rifle in that cartridge, and the Soviets actually put those things to good use. Now they were still kind of obsolete by the end of the war, but they did more than anything else in the anti-tank field.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize. And how was it shooting this Mauser? That must have been a little, it, you know.
Awful.
Did you think about how expensive the rounds are every time you shoot some of these things?
We spent So the owner of that rifle brought it down. He came to visit. He's a guy I know. He's a cool guy, very cool guy, brilliant gun collector. He actually, while it was still being published, he wrote the Q&A section for Arms Heritage magazine. I think he still does Q&A for American Rifleman, maybe. Um, he and I spent 3 months looking for ammo before that video, and we came up with 4 original cartridges. So because we were testing penetration, we couldn't just hand load it because we needed the original powder charge and most importantly, the original bullet.
Wow.
We ended up with 4 cartridges and 2 of them didn't work. We had,
that sucks.
and frankly, the cost was a lot less substantial than the fact that it took us 3 months to find 2 cartridges.
And one of them blew the gun off the stand.
They both did. So yeah, people give the most common comment on that video is calling me an idiot for using sticks like that. That was a shooting stick. It's like a hunting shooting stick or shooting
Yeah.
bipod. And we used it because that gun was awful to shoot. And frankly, we just didn't want to shoot it from the shoulder prone where you're not moving and the gun just slams
Right.
into you. Call me
Hurts.
wimp. May at CN Arsenal did fire it from the shoulder, but I'll accept that. I didn't want to. And so the gun's owner was standing right there. He's the one who brought the sticks. He's the one who suggested the sticks. And even after the first shot, the gun fell off the sticks. He was just fine with us doing it again the same way. So
yeah, I guess you're not going to break it.
As long as the
no,
guy said,
you
"Do
might
it."
break the county with that thing, but
Yeah.
yeah, those guns are. It's remarkable how heavy they are, and yet how intense the recoil is anyway.
Amazing. And you penetrated, right? You penetrated everything
Yes.
you brought, right? So it was
So we
pretty strong.
used. I know I detailed all this in the video description. Off the top of my head, I think it was 1/2-inch AR 500 steel, which is equivalent to the frontal armor on a British World War I tank. We used like 12 millimeter in the front, and then I think 8 and 6 millimeter elsewhere. We went through it square on. When we angled it at 45 degrees, I can't remember now if it went through or not.
I remember now.
I should have braced it better, but I did brace it. What you see largely happening is
No, it didn't go through, but it left a dent in there, though.
Yeah. And there are a number of things. Like if I could do it again, I'd put some ballistics gel on the inside to see try to capture what actually came through. I would brace it a little more heavily, but I don't think that impacted our results really.
So does that interest you? Like we talk about redoing videos, but redoing it just for a different idea, not because of bad quality.
Yeah.
If you get a
Definitely.
new tools or new toys to play with, like that monitors, slow motion cameras and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the tank gewehr, the issue would be finding more ammunition for it. I will often buy weird ammo in small quantities when I come across it. Like I have 10 rounds of 55 boys. I don't have a boys anti-tank rifle. I don't have any plans to get one, but I found the ammunition one time at a gun show and figured, you know what? I think it was like $200 for 10 rounds, but whatever.
Yeah, I saw some
And I
nice
can
pulse
play the ammo when we find it and hold on to it until I have the opportunity to use it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially with some of the prices for some of these rare ammos go. If it's a deal, grab it.
Yeah, we found some at the Tulsa gun show, and my friend actually bought, I think, 5 rounds of 55 boys on a clip.
Okay, some of it's out there. It's not nearly as hard to get as the tank gewehr.
Okay, question 5. The most popular forgotten weapons YouTube short is somehow not a machine gun or a semi-auto rifle or even something forgotten, but is of this World War One military issued. I won't even say what type it is, make it a little harder. Military issued gun used by this country. So I need the country and the gun.
Spain.
So wait, what do you think it is?
So Winchester 1895 Russian contract.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But I
tricky.
know that it went to Spain because that's my
That
gun.
it did. That it's hit. Oh yeah? Oh, see, that's one of the ones from the collection.
That one's actually mine. And see, that's easy
Man.
because I have a total of like 6 shorts that I published. 10
Yeah.
maybe, but
Now, I heard a rumor that the Russians would reject rifles because of trivial flaws like the wood grain is it
yes.
wasn't straight. Is that true?
I don't know about specifically the wood grain not being straight, but they were extremely strict. Yeah. There was a Russian inspection detail at Winchester inspecting rifles in the factory when those were
Oh,
being made. And yes, they would reject them for basically anything.
and who pays for
There's a
that when they reject it? Is
Winchester.
that on Winchester? Yeah. Wow.
It's rebuild it, like fix it, and send it back through if you want to get it approved. There's a fantastic book on this subject called Allied Rifle Contracts in America by Luke Mercaldo. It
Yeah, I
is
haven't
about,
seen that.
yeah, it's all the rifle production for the Allies that was done in the US during World War One. So Winchester 1895s, the American-made Mosins, the
Those
Belgian
Remington.
Mausers, made by, well, not Harrington and Richardson, someone. Berthier's, Remington rolling blocks. It's a fantastic book. It's not that expensive. I highly recommend it. It's extremely well done.
Yeah, that'd be a cool book to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it for part 1. If you can't wait a few weeks for the part 2, you can grab it up on the Patreon at MILSURP HQ. Part 2 has all of our MILSURP Arms questions, our FUD lore, our user submitted questions, the speed round, comments about shooting guns, reloading, other content creators, the future of the channel. So make sure you check out that one too.
To be continued.